Hello everyone and welcome to the World of Andy Crofts. Now, I've been thinking about doing this for quite a while now. Not a podcast about like one particular subject, not an interview show, not something where I feel like I have to stick to a format or pretend to be an expert in anything. Just a place where I can sit down, switch on a microphone and talk about whatever happens to be on my mind. The funny thing is, when you give yourself complete freedom though, it can be difficult to know where to start, right? So, I thought I'd start at the beginning. Now, this isn't a podcast about stories, the story of my life. It's not going to be like that. I'm going to talk in this episode a little bit about the beginnings for me. But in general, every episode could be completely random about whatever I'm thinking about, the ups or downs of my mind. And why am I doing this? You know why? Because sometimes I just feel like I need to speak, and I don't know why I need to speak. I just need to get it out of my system. Now, ironically, I'll be doing it on here, but I'm not actually very good at expressing my feelings or thoughts to anybody. I don't know why. Maybe it's drilled into my brain through doing music that it's just normal that I talk to a crowd more than one person. I know it's weird, isn't it? But I don't know. I don't write a diary. I've tried writing diaries over the years. I've had a go. But I just found it a bit tedious. It's like, who am I writing the diary for? I want to read it again. What's the point? Do you know what I mean? So I thought, well, if I just speak about anything I feel like, then this will be my outlet. And if people want to listen and think it's not necessarily interesting, but they just sort of like to listen. If you want to just be riding your bike or mowing the lawn and just listen to someone rabbit on a bit, then maybe that's what some people might like. But I'm going to do it anyway, because for me, I need to get things out. And it's also good for me to spark memories throughout my life. So, yeah, anyway, like I said, let's start further back at the beginning. Okay? So, music. Music has always been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. Before I even picked up an instrument, before I knew anything about songwriting or recording studios or bands, I was singing. I was singing all the time. I sang along to records. I sang around the house. I sang because it felt natural. It wasn't a conscious thing. I wasn't trying to become a singer. I wouldn't even know where to start. I wasn't thinking about a future in music. I just loved it. I had to do it. Something just made me. I was impelled to do it. Now, I guess this would have been in the 80s, early 80s for me. And I would have listened to a lot of music. Obviously, current music on the radio and stuff like that. They were the days when, I'm sure a lot of you remember, you had a tape recorder, and to get the songs, most of the time, you would have to sit there with your tape recorder, with your finger over you press record and then you press pause, and you sat there and you're waiting. You're just waiting for the song you've been waiting for. Or maybe you take a chance on a few extras. But, and then you're waiting so you can cut out the talking and just press pause and get it straight on there. And you're like, yes, I've got the song. Because, unless you could afford to buy it, which I certainly couldn't. Number one, I was too young to have any money. Number two, I wouldn't have had any money anyway in my family. Do you know what I mean? So that was the only way for me to get music. So the music of then was on my radar, but it didn't really sort of sink in to my mind. if that makes any sense. Does it? No. Well, you know when you sort of listen to music, but you don't really listen to it. That's kind of where my head was at. But it was only certain things, certain music, certain people that would spark things off in my mind and make me think sort of outside my little bubble. For example, right, once at school, at lower school, Booth Lower School in Northampton, I can't remember how young I was, but I know it must have been, I'm guessing I was about 7 or 8, right? And I wasn't one of them little kids like, nah, nah, nah. You know, I was quite switched on. I knew what was going on, right? Anyway, at school, the teacher, I can't remember her name, but she came in with this massive pile of records. Or she had them there already. She'd got them in the classroom before we even arrived. And there was this huge pile of records. And we were like, what's that, miss? And she said a newspaper had a load of spares and gave her sent her a giant pile of records. And I was like, okay, so what now? And she went, well, you can all have one. So naturally, I'm still the same. I love a freebie. I love anything I can get for free, right? So I was like, yeah, all right. So she went round the class and handed them out. And I guess everyone in the class probably assumed it was going to be, you know, like a record of the times with all the 80s stuff on it. You know, like Whitney Houston and all that. Phil Collins, whatever, all that stuff on it. But no. Now this record, I must say, it was the opening door to my mind in a way that I can't even explain. It was a rock and roll record, right? Randomly from a newspaper, they must have been doing some sort of thing, deal or competition, but either way, this pile of records was here and they were rock and roll records, like a compilation, right? Now, I took the record home and got out the record player, and I already knew about some of these artists. It had people on like Buddy Holly, The Big Bopper, Little Richard, Brenda Lee, Richie Valens, you know, a lot of that sort of era of rock and roll, right? Bill Haley as well, you know. And I already knew some of the classic songs because you just do. They're sort of put into the, you know, the tapestry of your life, right? They're weaved in whether you like it or not. But I played this record and the first song, if I remember rightly, I might be wrong, but the first song that blew my mind at the time was Rave On by Buddy Holly. Now, I hadn't heard that song as far as I remember. I only knew all the others, you know, like Peggy Sue and stuff. But when I heard Rave On, to me, at the time, being that little kid, it felt like punk in a way to me. I know it's not punk music in the slightest, right? But to me, it felt really heavy and like really in my face. And I couldn't even, there was something taking over my body that I couldn't get my head around. And it felt like something unlocked in my mind. So I went through the rest of the record, and other songs I still buzzed off and still got great vibes. And I was digging it, and it felt like home, this music. I suddenly pushed the 80s stuff to the side, you know, the contemporary stuff, and this rock and roll stuff just felt like it was always meant to have been in my brain. And that was it, really. That opened up so many things to me, all because of that free record we all got given. Now, I'm sure most, or not, if not all of the kids in the class would have just dumped that, you know, or give it to their mum or dad or whatever. But to me, I cherished this record, and I read all of the writing on it, all the descriptions about each artist on there. And I was just fascinated. To be honest, I've been to hundreds of car boots in my life, and I've always searched for that record. I've found some that are very similar. Like them old records, they sometimes would do a compilation and then you'd find a similar compilation with the same track listing of songs but a different cover. Well, I tried to find that one because I can't fully picture the cover. I feel like if I saw it, I would know. But yeah, anyway, that was such a huge deal to me. And around then, the artists I sort of gravitated towards then were people like Buddy Holly, the Beatles, which are obviously, as you all know, I'm a huge Beatle nut, right? But the Beatles were like in my family, like they were probably in nearly every family in England. But my auntie was a huge Beatles fan, and she would have like albums with the Beatles. And for me, it was just the simple Red and Blue album. As a kid, they supplied me with everything I needed to know about the Beatles at the time without having to go deeper into the actual albums. These little compilations were like a godsend. And at the time I was kind of living in two places. I mean, my mum worked all hours under the sun to try and help us get by. It was just me and my mum, no one else, no father figure. We'll go into that in another episode, right? But it was just me and my mum. But obviously, I didn't have a father or anyone to watch me, so I would basically live with my grandparents, okay? And while my mum was off working in a casino, all hours, I would be at my nan's and pap's. In Northampton, we say nan and pap, okay? But my grandmother and grandfather, if that makes you feel better. And I had a little bedroom. They had a bedroom, I had a bedroom. And my auntie also lived in this little house. So we were all squashed in. At some point or another, my uncles have lived in there. There's been a lot of people wedged in this tiny little house in Northampton. On Keswick Drive, to be precise. 30 Keswick Drive. And, my auntie's bedroom was just down the hallway. When I say down the hallway, like it's long, I'm talking 5 footsteps, and you're there. It was that small. And I would put notes under her door, because she was kind of like, or is, shall I say, she's still with us. I would write, Auntie Mandy, please can I come in your bedroom and, hang out with her, basically. And I'd slide it under the door, and then I'd just stand by mine or sit on the floor near mine waiting for an answer. And then the door would open and she'd go, come on then. And then she'd be playing like the Beatles' Red or Blue album, for example. Or even better, I'd write a note. At the time it was better. I'd write a note saying, can I come in and watch Spitting Image? Because I loved Spitting Image in the 80s. It was so good. And so we'd go in and watch that, and we'd both be in hysterics. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, the Beatles, that was around me all the time. And it was sort of crushed into my veins. And without knowing, it was building and building and teaching me things like teachers at school would. Do you know what I mean? As Paul Weller said once, I had 4 teachers at school, John, Paul, George, Ringo. And I totally agree. Also, I was listening to the Jackson 5. Now, this is kind of where I guess my soul influence maybe stemmed from. Because my mum, she was well into soul music, like really into it. And she had a lot of records laying around when I was a kid, like Sam and Dave. And it went into me just like the Beatles did. And for some reason, with Michael Jackson at the time being a little kid, obviously I wasn't there at the actual time of the Jacksons, right? I'm talking about my time. But because Michael Jackson was a kid in the Jackson 5, I think maybe I related to him because he just felt like one of the kids. But the difference with him was that his singing was incredible and immaculate and soulful. And I think that really taught me like so much about singing, like, and perfecting things. And it's hard to explain because it's not like I sat there and studied it. I'm talking over years and years. This subconscious thing going into my brain was teaching me about life, and it's a weird one. I'm sure we've all had these kind of things, but for me, all of these songs that were going into me like like feeding my soul, these were the things that would eventually lead to me doing music in the future. Well, I mean, looking back, that's, Buddy Holly, the Beatles and the Jackson 5, that's quite an interesting combination, I guess. Melody was always there, strong melodies, songs that stayed with you, that kind of thing. Songs that felt alive, mainly. At the time, I didn't know what harmony was. I didn't know what songwriting structure was. I mean, I wasn't even interested in songwriting then. All I cared about was hearing these lush melodies. And every time I heard them, it gave me a feeling, of something magical. And that's all I needed. All I needed was the melody, like the sugar, do you know what I mean? The icing on the cake. That's all I did. I didn't need anything deep. And because I was a kid, I would sing these songs all the time in my bedroom. So much. And I've probably thought I was, doing them exactly. I probably wasn't. But I knew I was in tune. I just knew what sounded good, really. And because I was a kid, I assumed everyone else experienced music in exactly the same way. I remember being aware that I could sing in tune, but I didn't think it was anything special. I just assumed everybody could hear the notes and find them naturally. Nobody had ever explained that it was a skill. Nobody had explained that not everybody heard music in the same way. It was just normal to me. And then one day, years later, shall I say, something happened that would change everything. I became obsessed with the idea of owning a guitar. Now, the strange thing is, I didn't know anything about guitars. I couldn't play one. I didn't know any chords. I didn't know how they worked. I think I'd only seen one in the flesh once in my life. Because at school, I was always in the bad groups, the bad classes, where basically you'd turn up to class and the teacher would be like, right, you lot play these keyboards, they'd give us all a little electric keyboard each. You play them and we'll be back in an hour. It's that kind of thing. They didn't care or give a shit about teaching us, the bad kids, shall I say, or the kids from maybe the poorer areas, shall I say in another way. They didn't really care, And at the time, we'd all have a keyboard in front of us at the school, and we'd all play the usual, like EastEnders or E.T. or whatever, right? We weren't bothered about playing, but I actually was secretly loving having a keyboard to myself. It was really exciting. But I knew there was a room near my classroom, right? And it was always locked, but they had a little glass panel on the door. And if you looked through, you could see a drum kit. And I was like, wow, like I would look through that window and go, wow, look, there's a real drum kit. Never seen one in my life, but apart from in that room. And I remember there was a double bass stood next to it and a white, I think they're like a white Stratocaster, I think, leant against the wall. And I was like, I can't believe I can see these instruments. And they were like holy in a way that, I was like forbidden to touch them. And that just made me want to do it even more. And I remember once that door was unlocked. And I remember walking up to it, noticing it was unlocked, and I crept in and I touched the drums. I remember thinking, wow, and I got the stick and I just hit it a little bit, obviously not to get the teacher's attention. And I also went on the double bass and played a few notes, and I touched the guitar, but I didn't know anything about it. And it was so exciting, and I don't know why. This is the beauty of things in life, isn't it? You just don't know why, but something was calling me to it. There was just something about it all that fascinated me. I mean, it was almost hypnotic. It's difficult to explain now because it happened so naturally, but I remember looking at guitars and feeling as though they were calling me. Not in some mystical way, just a feeling. Like there was something waiting for me that I was yet to find. I remember spending ages looking through catalogues. I mean, back then, I don't know if you remember, but the catalogue in England was a big deal. A catalogue felt like a treasure chest. You'd turn the pages and imagine what life would be like if you owned this thing or that thing. And after slowly flipping through the toy pages, there it was, a guitar. To most people, it was probably just another item on another page. But to me, it felt like possibility. I wanted one desperately. The problem was, I couldn't exactly go out and buy one. I had no money, and there was no way anyone had ever offered me one. There were no musicians in my family, nobody that could hand me down one, or I could just see leaning against the wall. There was nothing. So, as I was living with my nan and that, I started working my charms on my nan. I tried to convince her that this guitar wasn't just something I wanted, it was something I needed. I don't know how persuasive I really was, but somehow it worked. And eventually I got my first guitar. Now looking back, that moment feels enormous. At the time it probably seemed quite ordinary. Just a young boy getting an instrument. But life is funny like that. You don't always recognise the moments that change everything while they're happening, do you? Sometimes they only reveal their importance years and years later, which I've found with so many things. Now, just going aside slightly, back at my mum's house, over the road, one of my friends, Mark, lived literally opposite. His dad was a musician. I mean, an incredible piano player, pianist, whatever you call it. He was just incredible. And sometimes he'd be playing the piano with his windows open, and I would sit outside in my front garden. I'd just sit on my wall or whatever, hearing him play. And it was like hearing Mozart or something mythological coming out of them windows. And he was so talented. He was called Elson, if I remember rightly. Yeah, Elson. And he was my friend's dad. And he was always, looking back, he was always quite hip. Do you know what I mean? He always had like cool friends round and that. And I remember once, I think this is when my guitar was on order. I was over their house and he picked up this guitar, like a 12-string guitar, and started playing these chords like really fast. And it blew my mind. I remember thinking, that just sounds incredible coming from that little wooden thing. And I was like, I didn't know anything. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say is that just fueled the fire even more. And then when my guitar eventually arrived from the catalogue, I picked it up and started trying to make sense of it. There was no grand plan, no 5-year strategy, no vision board, no idea where it might lead. There was just like a curiosity. And that curiosity became obsession. I would spend hours trying to play. In fact, I didn't even hold the guitar upright. I just lay it on my lap at first, because instead of like just trying to do it properly, it felt more comfortable to lay it on my lap. I know it sounds lame now, but when I first started, that's what I tried to do. As I said, I would spend hours trying to play and more hours listening. then more I was thinking about the music. I don't think I realised at the time, but I was becoming completely immersed in creativity. The thing about being young is that you absorb information without even noticing. You're like a sponge. Every song, every record sleeve, every interview, every chord progression, every melody, every mistake, and there's plenty of them, it all goes in. But it's not just the music, is it? It's the TV as well. It could be anything from watching Fools and Horses or The Two Ronnies or Juliet Bravo at the time. Do you know what I mean? It was like all of these things were part of, the things weaving your life together. And this is what life's about. As you get older, you realise when you have the luxury of looking back and going, of course, that happened because it led to this and led to that. But at the time, you don't even know. You're just a sponge soaking it all in. And without realising, you're building something inside yourself. So I used to stay up late listening to music. Sometimes I'd be playing guitar. Sometimes I'd be lying there with headphones on, completely lost in another world. The world around me in my early teens wasn't really very exciting for me. It was not giving me what I needed. And I think this is why music was the thing that called me. I wanted to create my own world, my own bubble. And the world wasn't giving it to me, so I did it. And I felt like I was in charge of something, if that makes any sense. When I was listening or trying to play music, it was a place I could visit, a place I could disappear into. And it felt bigger than ordinary life. And I think that's probably where creativity really began for me. Not with ambition or success, not with dreams of being in a band. It didn't even cross my mind. It was just something I had to do. But with curiosity, a desire to explore. A feeling that there was something just beyond the edge of everyday life. Like something beautiful, something exciting, something impossible to fully explain. And I've often thought about that feeling, that kind of magical thing that just hovers outside the edge of normal life. We all have access to it, but very few reach it. And that's a thing that I think I'm constantly striving for, to reach this thing. Do you know what I mean? It's not fame, not recognition, not any of the things people assume musicians are chasing. I'm just chasing that feeling. That feeling I had when I was young and discovering things for the first time. The feeling that anything was possible. That creativity could open doors into entirely new worlds. And maybe that's why I've started this podcast. Because when I look back over my life, the things that matter most aren't always the achievements. They're the stories, the strange moments, the memories, people, conversations, the unexpected turns, maybe good or bad, the things that couldn't be planned. That's what life really is, isn't it? Not milestones, but moments. And I want this podcast to be somewhere I can explore those moments with you. And some episodes might be about music. Some might be about growing up. Some might be about the news that day. Nothing to do with me, just what's in the news. I might just read about it. Might tell you what I'm thinking. Some might be about creativity. Some might be about things I've noticed just lately. I generally don't know. But in all honesty, I quite like that. Because life itself doesn't follow a script, does it? It wanders. One thought leads to another. One memory unlocks another memory. One story becomes 3 more stories. You know how it is. And that's how conversations work. So that's how I want this podcast to work too. No formula, just just chatting. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you ever want me to try and talk about something in particular, then you can email me. I would like to, maybe pick up on people's thoughts, and join in that sort of conversation. So perhaps this first episode is really just about beginnings, talking a little bit about my life, a tiny percent, but just a little bit, just to get things rolling, to help you understand where I kind of came from. I mean, trust me, if you really want to go into my story, it goes back much further. It's not just starting with the guitar, it's starting in Sao Paulo, Brazil, if you really want to get deep. And then my story, obviously, like most of us, will go back to my mum. But my mum, she was a dancer. She was a dancer in the Moulin Rouge and in the circus in Brazil. These things, and the Royal Palladium, London. All of these things are incredible, but they all led me to this moment in life. And I just want to talk about it. I mean, my mum's story is pretty fascinating. I've often thought about writing a book about her because I think she deserves it. I mean, every person is a book, right? And I think I will do that. But I think I will, at some point as I get this podcast rolling, I will bring her up a lot more and try and highlight some of the things about, about her life. So yeah, this episode was just a quick glimpse into my past, about the young lad sitting in his bedroom with a guitar, about staying awake long after everyone else had gone to sleep, about becoming fascinated by music, about discovering creativity and not knowing where any of it would lead. And maybe it's also about recognising that we're never really finished. We're still becoming something. We're still learning, still searching, still finding our way. And if you're listening to this, maybe that's true of you too. Thank you all for listening. For those very few that even know about this, if you want to help me out, just make sure you follow the podcast, review it if you like, and tell your friends. And let's try and create something here. Let's try and get the World of Andy Crofts a bit more, spread across the land a bit more. But yeah, nice one, everyone. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.